We're live for a very exciting session today. We're joined by Phil Gurin, all the way from California, and you'll tell us where you are exactly. But just to give you a quick background, Phil is actually the president CEO of the Gurin Company, and he's also the chairman of FRAPA. And he's here in his capacity as the chairman of FRAPA. We're actually going to discuss a lot about TV formats. And Phil, you're going to open up that entire world for us and for all our listeners. On behalf of Vitrina and our entire community of 70,000 plus people joining in from 100 countries, very, very pleased to actually have you speak with us today about TV formats and everything television.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Phil, would love to actually sort of start off with a brief introduction about you. I know about the production background that you have. And then, of course, being the chairperson of FRAPA, you also have lots of other businesses and aspects, including the wine company that was very, very curious. But if you can maybe just give us a background about your journey so far, that'd be
my pleasure. So I'm a writer, producer, creator, and I've always been a writer and a producer. I've always created shows and written on all my shows. Originally from New York, lived in Los Angeles now a very, very long time, and started as a freelance writer, director, producer for hire. Worked for about 70 companies as a freelancer until I started selling my own shows to the broadcasters here in the US. So I've created a bunch of shows, created a bunch of specials. We do production services. Our company is a full service production company. I like to say we create them, we find them, we co-create them, we sell them, we make them. And about 2 years ago, we set up also a new distribution company, TGC Global Entertainment. So we're also selling and acquiring shows from all over the world, not just ours, but third party. But here in the US, about 25 years ago, I started bringing formats from around the world into the United States. I fell in love with the world of formats. Even after I had worked in documentary and reality for other companies, once I set up my own business, I thought it was fascinating. I remember reading an article about a company in Los Angeles who found a TV show in England and brought it to the United States. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. I want to do that too. So I started reaching out to companies in Europe to start understanding more about formats that would travel. And I got involved in it, as I say, about 25 years ago, maybe a little longer, but I don't want to make myself sound too much older, and have been fortunate to bring shows to the United States, but also now bringing shows all over the world. So that's the company. And we do live events, we do specials, we do game shows, reality competition shows. Over the years, my company has partnered with producers and platforms in about 15 different countries. Wow. So while we're a proud and happy independent company, we work like a little mini group, if you will, with our partners all over the world. We have joint ventures. I'm sure we'll talk about this with other companies around the world. And I love international television, and I love formats, which got me involved in FRAPA many years ago. I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. And yeah, I make wine. It's a side hustle here in California, but I'll show you that bottle later.
Okay. Fantastic. No, that was a great background. And again, there's just so much of experience in all of that you described, just in terms of understanding how the cookie is made, how the cookie is sold, how the cookie is designed. It's just fascinating to see that evolution during this particular period. Talk a little bit about, your sort of early experience with sort of broadcast and cable, and, just the journey of how that's changed to today. It's obviously sort of become faster. It's become, dramatically different. It's also become very global. And I don't know if you sort of see that and feel that in how it's changed.
Well, when I started my career as a freelance writer, it was easy. I'd get hired on a show. And I started working on shows for Nickelodeon and MTV a long, long time ago. My first show was working as a comedy writer on a game show for MTV called Remote Control. And then I worked at Nickelodeon on shows called Double Dare, Super Sloppy Double Dare, Make the Grade, Wild and Crazy Kids. And then, as I say, I worked for so many different companies learning my craft. And then when I set up my own companies, after I started selling shows, the business model was appealing. It was very different than it is today. You would take an idea, you would hopefully sell it, you would negotiate in the US with a broadcaster. They would say, we'll pay you this much money for 2 runs. This is what it's going to cost us. We'll give you this, and here are the basic assumptions of what that show is. and then you made it. And if the network wanted you to add more things, they would pay for it. If they didn't want to add more things, you would make it for that money and hopefully profit for whatever you could. But more importantly, you could keep your intellectual property. You would own it. Essentially, you would rent the show to the broadcaster, and then you'd own it. You'd build your library. You'd build your asset value. That's how it worked for 60 years in the television business, and it started to change in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Then we started to create shows and find shows in our broadcast. If we found a show internationally, I helped bring shows like Weakest Link and Lingo to the United States, and Dragon's Den brought those shows to the United States. Because they existed in other territories, the U.S. broadcaster couldn't own the IP. So that was another way to start launching shows. In the early 2000s, throughout the 2000s, create your own show, launch it internationally, hold on to your rights, and then sell them, and then build an asset and hopefully make a lot of money. And then when the big networks caught on to that and realized it wasn't just scripted shows that would make a lot of money, but reality shows and formats could make a lot of money, they got into the business of it, and they tried to fight to own or co-own the intellectual property as well. Now, all these years later, it's very, very hard for an independent company own its own show, even if it's launched in another country. Because here in the US, the most valuable shows are launched here, the UK, and a few other territories around the world: Scandinavia, Netherlands, Israel, Japan, and Korea. These are places where the biggest shows get launched to travel around the world. There are exceptions, of course. There are shows from everywhere, and we're working on those with our distribution company. So we've watched the business model change, and you have to change, and you have to be positive and roll with the times. We're now going through a period where even more radical change. I'm sure, again, we'll talk about this. Right. So, stay positive and keep rolling.
Fantastic. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, as you described the whole evolution of television broadcast and cable, and then the lead up to formats, it's a good segue to sort of maybe explain what a format is for a host of people who are sort of joining in. They understand that they want in to what formats are, and maybe even join the FRAPA community.
Well, I'm looking down because I should have prepared myself better. But we wrote on our FRAPA website, myself and another woman named Haley Babcock, we drafted a definition of what a format is.
That'd be awesome, actually, to run through that, actually, yeah.
And FRAPA as an organization, I should say, FRAPA stands for the Format Recognition and Protection Association. It is a non-profit organization headquartered in the Netherlands, but with members all over the world. And, we're dedicated to the recognition and protection of formats and intellectual property. So our format definition, if I can only read it, I'd like to read it to you, but I have to find it on our website.
Okay.
Can we just pause for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
So on the FRAPA website, we talk about this. There's two ways to describe a format. Either as a noun or as a verb. So as a noun, a format is a specific type of intellectual property that allows for and guides the replication of the original idea in subsequent iterations across media, platforms, and territories. That's the noun. That's what we use. And there's some definitional examples. As a verb, as in to format a show, to turn an existing piece of intellectual property, for example, fiction, nonfiction, a song, a movie or something, a game, into a unique and original guide with repeatable elements to be recreated and distributed. And again, we have definition. We expand those two definitions, but it's the idea that it is something that is repeatable, and you can take it like a cookbook and make it in other territories by following that recipe, if you will. And the recipe is deep, right? Okay. And in FRAPA, we like to talk about what constitutes the format, for sure.
Fascinating. Thank you for the definition, because again, there are a host of folks who talk about formats, but again, to really sort of understand exactly what FRAPA defines as a format is again useful and very exciting. So what actually is part of the recipe? The logos, the set design, the music, again, for a layperson, if you can explain just all the elements and the fattest book that you've seen for a format, how would you describe the chapters in it?
Well, again, I don't mean to just look down and read. I like to make eye contact with you as we're talking.
Sure.
But we talk about this on our website, on the FRAPA website. In television or in any audio video medium, right? Television is a catch-all for all kinds of distribution mechanisms.
That's right.
A clear and repeatable set of elements that, when combined, enable the production of a program. Elements may include, but are not limited to, narrative structure, character descriptions, set and lighting plans, graphic and audio designs, music, sound effects, rules, production procedures, and anything else that permits subsequent users to reproduce the original concept. The original idea may or may not be commercially produced, as it is the initial intellectual creation and accompanying elements and instructions that immediately establishes it, its origin, its ownership. So you want to be able to create all those things.
All of the
You've
elements.
created now a format.
That's right. That's right. Fascinating. And essentially all that is defined in the development guide that typically sort of comes with the entire package of licensing then a format.
If you license a format, you will license what's called the Bible, right? And the Bible contains, I call it, it's a cookbook. If you follow the recipe, it should be in there. The best Bibles are the ones with the most detail, so that a country that's, you can make the show just from reading it and watching one episode. But then typically a format will travel to other territories, and the company that owns that format will send flying producer, we call them, as a consultant to go help show you what we mean by the set goes here and the graphic comes here and you roll this music cue at this moment and the lights dim here if it's a studio show, or if it's a reality competition show, this is where you stand. This is how you cast your contestants. This is the rules. This is the twists. All those things are in your Bible.
Fascinating. And, I mean, having having consumed formats, some successful ones, especially in gaming and reality shows, there are so many aspects that actually travel, and irrespective of which country you land in, some of the music, some of the transitions, some of the logos actually have the same color scheme. And I guess that's all part and parcel of the Bible.
Well, it is. And depending on the rights holder who owns the show that's being distributed, famously, the folks who created Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is a perfect example of a show where they insisted that every set, every version of the show look, feel, sound the same. So they were very strong advocates for, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to dip the music here. You're going to move these lights here. So all over the world, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was identical. Other shows have had, the flexibility to change. Sometimes the rights holder needs to work with the local producer and the local platform to make adaptations that are culturally sensitive or more culturally specific, so that it fits every country. I don't believe in every country. Well, I can't be an expert on this, so I'm not so sure. But some of the big studio shows may not look the same in every country. And some of the reality shows may not look the same in every country, but many.
Fascinating. Phil, this actually is a good segue to really even defining why FRAPA exists. Why did it sort of come into existence? And maybe if you can talk a little bit about that. What does it try to do? What do the members look like? Is it broadcast and streamers, broadcast, format development companies? A little bit about the group.
25 years ago, a group of international distribution guys got together. And I say guys, men and women, but it was mostly men at the time. As the big companies were fighting with one another about ripoffs.
Right.
And there was a specific show, you can read about it in the history of FRAPA on our website, that one large company was accusing the other of ripping off. And so some really smart people, David Lyle, Paul Gilbert, Michelle Rodriguez, and some others, got together and said, there's got to be a better way than us fighting. There's got to be a better way than us going to law, going to suing each other in a court.
Right.
So they created FRAPA initially as a means to mediate these disputes between some of the biggest companies who were selling formats at that time.
Okay.
And they agreed to it, and they did it. And for the first few years, they did a few mediations, and it kept things out of the courts. It kept things less expensive for all these companies. But then FRAPA kind of evolved because the big companies not all the big companies wanted to sign up for FRAPA because they felt, oh my God, we'd have to go to mediation. Does that mean by being a FRAPA member, we're going to lose our rights to go to court? So while we offer mediation, we haven't done one in decades. We ended up doing other things. We ended up offering a format analysis service where members who feel they've been ripped off, I'm just going to be blunt about it, if they feel they've been ripped off by a show that's on the air, we will, as a service, compare the two shows with our proprietary format analysis service. We
Okay.
rank shows, and this was vetted by our whole board of industry experts, and it took several years to get it right. But a board of people from all over the world who really are deeply experienced in formats. We created this format analysis service, and then you just watch both shows. You just watch both shows, and then you give it a score. This is exactly the same. This is not. This is kind
Right.
of the same. And then we come up with a number of how much of a copy we thought the format is, and people have used that in trials all around the world. The other thing that early on in 2000, in the early 2000s, many countries did not even recognize the idea of a format. They did not recognize the legal standing
Hmm.
of content creation of what a format is. And they just thought they can do whatever they want. They could do ripoffs of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and Big Brother and The Voice. They can just do what they want. Hopefully, through education, through what FRAPA has spoken about on panels, what we've written about, our board members kind of populating the world, we think people really do now understand what a format is and how important it is to protect that format for the original rights holders, whether it's the creator, producer, production company, or distribution company. Because if everybody rips everybody off, there's no business. There's no global
Right.
business. It's just local, and you just make some short money. If you really want to build a business, you have to respect intellectual property, and you have to respect the whole global food chain of distribution. So that's how FRAPA evolved. We have a format registration service. So if you feel you've created something on such and such a date, you can register it with FRAPA, and you can always point to on January 1st, 2018, that's when we registered our format with FRAPA. Doesn't guarantee that you can prove you created it. That's a different law, but you can at least
Right.
use that as I was first. We registered it on this date, so we were before somebody else did that. We
Hmm.
have on our website, we do a Bible guide, how to create a Bible, like we've just been talking about. Budget calculators, which we need to update. There's other services that FRAPA plans to offer this year, because this is our 25th anniversary. So as we enter what I call FRAPA 3.0, our third generation of FRAPA, you'll see lots of new services coming.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Currently, what type of members do you have? Do you have format developers? Do you have broadcasters, streamers, broadcasters, all of the above? If you can describe also just the community in FRAPA.
Absolutely. So, FRAPA depends on members. It's a nonprofit organization. So we depend on our members and we depend on sponsors. Our sponsors are the big companies, the big global companies that support the mission of FRAPA is about mission and services, right? Some of the
Right.
services I've just talked to you about, the mission is spreading the gospel, protect your formats. Basically, I always say, I won't rip you off. Don't rip me off. That's the bottom line. Respect my format. I'll respect your format. So the kinds of members we have, to answer your question: startups, indies, small indies, middle class, mid-size indies, and big companies. But the big companies, who have all their own lawyers on staff, need to support the food chain, if you will, the whole ecosystem of the format world. So if you're just starting out creating formats, you're a producer, a format creator, an independent production company or distributor, come to FRAPA, meet your colleagues around the world. So we start with individuals, small companies, new companies, mid-sized companies, and big companies. And on our
Right.
board, we have producers, creators, distributors, journalists who work in this world, people who work in branded content, people who work in production companies. And we welcome everybody, because we also like to do networking, and we
Right.
just know it's a community. We, at various events like MIPCOM or Content London, we like to be there to throw events where you can hear people speak, but also meet
Hmm.
your colleagues and network, because that's also very, very important.
Understood. Understood. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure um, our message sort of is reaching a host of prodcos and just folks who are very interested in the business of formats, for them to get energized with the mission of FRAPA and then become members of
We
the.
want them to become members. We need your money, of course, but we want you to become members and have a voice, ask questions. In the future, we're going to be offering more things, more mentorship, more networking events, more information. I draw your attention also to the website. So our website is a good information source, right? That's where you'll
Right.
find the full definition of what a format is. You'll find there our code of conduct, which, if you're a FRAPA member, to the rest of the world says you're a good citizen. You're a good, honorable global trader in formats. And you can put that logo on your website and on your stuff and say, I'm a FRAPA member. As long as you adhere to our code of conduct, other folks will know you're trustworthy and can work with, we can work together.
Right.
We also have something I'm very, very proud of. We wrote in 2016 our Declaration of Cooperation, which is like an international guide, if you will, for how the whole industry should work together and honor one another. We translated it into, I think, 18 different languages. It's on the website. If you're in the television business, your one language is probably there. And I really would draw your attention to our Declaration of Cooperation. So between that, the code of conduct, and our format definition, these are the underlying documents, if you will, that help us spread the gospel of what FRAPA is.
Fascinating. No, again, we will link this article, this podcast to the FRAPA website for members to actually sort of look at the definitions and some of those declarations as well. Those will be sort of very powerful resources for the community. One aspect, Phil, with your help, that I want to sort of chart out for all the listeners is really how the format is developed. Because, I've seen pretty interesting models. There are companies that are really having writers get into a room, get into workshops to develop formats. And some of these formats have some avenues to actually sort of be displayed or be presented to industry and to buyers. And I want to chart that journey right up to the business model or business models, of how formats are licensed and, how do they make money. So if you can maybe talk about the development process a little bit, just some best practices that you've seen, some interesting models that you've seen. Also, leading question is like, why are the Dutch so good with formats? We saw, last year, a lot of Dutch formats actually go through worldwide and become hits. We've seen Korea suddenly enter the formats market. They are actually sort of rolling out a lot of their successful shows, turning those into your cookbook guide recipes and sort of. So talk a little bit about those dynamics, maybe starting with development of formats.
Well, look, you nailed it right at the beginning of your question. You put a team together of creators and you start creating the idea.
That's right.
And depending on what genre you want to do, game show, talent show, social experiment, dating show, reality competition, just the big ones, right? And you target that and you sit around and hopefully your creative team is thinking what's not been served. Don't try to do another version of a show that's already on the air. What's new? Best way to create something of value is to create something that's new. We see a lot of people, we should talk about this before we're done today. We see a lot of people copying what exists and they get written, and in some territories that's okay. So try to be the first to air with an original idea is the best way to protect the value of your idea. So you have a bunch of creators or one creator and you create that IP and then you get it to a production company or a broadcaster or an agent in some territories and figure out how do you get it to the platforms? How do you get it to the place where someone's going to pay you to make it? Traditionally, it would have been a broadcast network or a digital platform. Now you can even go to brands who might pay for things originally and put things on the air. And when I say on the air, I don't necessarily mean a terrestrial broadcaster. I also mean they just may make it, pay for it, and put it on YouTube or other platforms like that. We are in a creator economy right now where all the rules are different. But so let's stay in the traditional model. You create a format, let's call it Wheel of Fortune. And you create Wheel of Fortune and it goes on the air in the United States, certainly the most valuable market for launching a show because most territories, if it's been on the air in the US, they'll probably take a chance on it. Also, that applies to the UK. Second tier would be Netherlands, Scandinavia, Israel, Korea, Japan.
Right.
That's there. But then you can also point to shows from Canada and South America and other European territories that have launched shows, but they're not in that top tier. They're not in that top tier of most exported. And then if you license a format, typically your distributor will be able to negotiate a fee based on a percentage, it's called a format fee, of what that budget is. Is it a net budget? I'm going to get very in the weeds here. Is it a gross budget? Is it a net budget? And if it's a net budget, what comes off the top? What is the formula for calculating the fee, the percentage for that format fee that you will get as the creator and or rights holder? You'll also be looking at, can you share in production revenue? Can you share in back end profits? I mean, these are all negotiable points. But now I want to get to the point you said, why the Netherlands? Well, the Netherlands, it's very specific. In the US, you have broadcasters and major streamers, right? You have ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, you have Netflix, Amazon, Peacock, Paramount, who, you have the big, what I call the GEGs. I write about them all
Yes.
the time, the global entertainment giants, the GEGs, the GEGs.
Right.
In the UK, you have BBC, ITV, Channel 4, 5, and Sky in the UK TV, and also Netflix and Amazon. When
Yep.
you start getting to the Netherlands, you have Talpa. And yes, you have other companies, but when you have a content creation company that also has access to a broadcaster, other territories have that as well. That's the best way to launch a show. If you can create a show and guarantee that it's on the air, boom, you've created an international format. So is the Netherlands the hotbed of creativity, or is it one or two large companies? In Belgium, is it one company, two companies, or everybody? Right? In Israel, is it one company or more? The UK and the US have a larger pool of platforms and a larger pool of content creators. I'm not saying that people in any of those countries are not wonderful creators. They absolutely are. Smaller territory, fewer people. But once you can guarantee putting it on the air, if you can guarantee a show that's going to be on the air in your territory and you know that you're going to get some decent number, you can effectively launch a global format. You also have the ability, if you're the owner of both the channel and the content, you can workshop it if you're willing to stay with it. You can pilot it. You can do a couple of pilots. If you go on the air in season 1 and you see it needs tweaking, you can do that as well. And look, that's just a great means to getting a show on the air. And the Koreans do this as well. The Japanese do this as well. Others do too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just talking about the ones that most people.
That's right. No, and exactly to your point, right? We're partners. I mean, Vitrina is partners with FRAPA, at least on the Intel part. And we are reading global data, and that data actually tells us that there are some hotbeds of activity. And there are some leaders in the pack. There are some followers. There are markets that typically love to follow, saying we will not risk. We'll not be the first ones to adopt a format, but we'll actually once some of these formats have actually sort of surfaced across major markets, we'll actually sort of bring those into our market. And it's always curious to sort of see that evolution of a really good idea or a great format as it travels across.
Sure. And there are two kinds of global citizens when we want to talk about platforms. There are the good global citizens who want to be first to air with the first IP, and they pay for it and they license it and they do the original and they do honor for everybody. Then there are those places, they shall remain nameless, but we hear them all the time, where they see an idea that's working and they may twist it just a little with somebody else. So they are number 2 into the marketplace. And usually you can see it, and I'm sure you guys at Vitrina can do this research for the last 20 years. First one to market is the most successful. There's room for the second version of a show or second type, very close cousin of a show in the marketplace. If you're first to air, A+. If you're second to air, B+. After that, you're just literally chasing wind because you're trying to chase a trend. Don't chase a trend. Go lead a trend. Go create something original and be the first.
Fascinating. And again, we read the data and we see some of these patterns, and it always makes us curious, especially some of these newer markets that are really trying to make an entry into the formats business, including Korea, as we were discussing earlier. One other question, Phil, that comes to mind then in context is really the business model. And also the are there companies that are happy just for their formats to be adopted? Or are there companies that will say, hey, if you want this format, you'll have to take us as one of the production companies. So they insert themselves as part of the overall equation.
Well, I don't know that inserting themselves is the right phrase. What I would say is, if you're one of the production companies, part of the GEGs, the global entertainment giants, if you're part of those big, massive companies, you're probably a part of it. So you're going to have the rights. If you're part of, I'm making this up, if you're part of ITV, and you're a French company, you're going to have access to all those shows. So when you go make that show, you're making the ITV version of a show that may have launched in the UK or the US or wherever, right? And that's not inserting you. You, as part of those global companies, automatically have the right for that catalog to take that show into your territory. If you're a small to medium indie, you may have to negotiate a deal. So let's imagine you're a country where none of these GEGs have a local production company. That's where you can go to the Banijés and the BBCs of the world and the NBCs of the world and say, we'd like to take your show into our smaller territory. Now, that negotiation may result in, fine, go, just pay us our format, pay us our back-end profit participation, and go have a lovely time. Or we need to be a co-pro partner with you. There's no rule there. It's all negotiable.
Okay. Got it. Understood. So since we're talking about negotiations, how does this make money?
No, it makes
You
money.
know,
The show's a hit. And
okay.
if you created a format and the show's hit, you will certainly benefit from your format fee, whether you get 100% of it or a portion of it. If you are able to get back end merchandising, ancillary stuff, advertising, when you pull a clip and put it on social media, there's money from ancillary and back end. And thirdly, if you're part of the production, if you are a co-producer, you may negotiate a percentage of production margin. But the real money, the real money is in a global hit that's in many countries, and you're getting that format fee. It can add up pretty quickly if it's a global hit.
Understood. And then, if you have we now sort of in a situation where the broadcast and cable business is now sort of switching to, there's a substantial set of streamers and global streamers. We've seen actually from our data that there are certain streamers that will take a particular format and then they will actually create local editions across all the key markets that they are, either they are entering into or that they already dominate, right? In that, is that also a good model for the format development company to license it once to a large global company and then have versions of those across different markets?
Well, it depends on your deal, right? Some of these platforms will just pay you a premium for the first right to do it, but then that's it. It's a buyout. So if it's a buyout, hopefully your buyout is good up front. Maybe I've heard stories of some of these places being more willing to share in the ongoing exploitation of multiple versions. But again, that's a negotiation. And the strongest negotiation position for you to always have is to have two buyers who want your show, not just one. If you have more than one buyer, you can negotiate a better deal. If you've shopped it to the 8 gigs and only one person wants it, you're going to make a deal just to get it sold. It's in the streamer's interest to control the global interest, the global exploitation of it. And depending on your deal, maybe it's good for you, maybe not. You don't know. And it depends on everything. There's no one size fits all. Nowhere in the world. And it's changing rapidly
As well. That's right. The business is evolving. So
one this is posted, the business is going to be totally different.
Well, let's see how that plays out.
I guarantee you the business is different by Monday.
Fascinating. I mean, and again, that's why we are in the Intel business. As the business evolves, we have to keep reporting that, and we are actually seeing very real-time changes in some of these aspects of the business. The one other question, Phil, that comes to mind also is that, the number of seasons that a format is usually licensed to. Is that negotiated upfront, or is that something that comes in if the show becomes a hit? And then how does that change as, a show becomes an absolute international hit? It goes into 15 countries, 20 countries. Does it become expensive then at that point for the 15th country to negotiate a multi-season format licensing arrangement?
It does, but it may not. There's no one size fits all here on this subject.
Okay.
Because I typically find European deals prefer to try to negotiate numbers of runs, numbers of episodes. And in the US, it just doesn't work that way. You'll sell it here and you'll sell it to them and they'll have it. And there's usually a tail if they haven't reordered it over a certain period of time. If it's canceled, who is going to own it moving forward? Does the channel own it moving forward? Can it revert back to you? Again, a negotiated point. In European deals, they're always wanting to know how many seasons, how many episodes. And it doesn't work that same way in the US. I mean, those are the two territories I can speak to specifically. So it's not one size fits all at all.
Understood. And again, we have seen historically some formats have actually switched to competitors once the rights have run out. And, again,
once the rights have run out or once a network cancels it because the studio has a better relationship with the second network than they did with the first, you'll see that happening in the US pretty quickly. There's a big game show that's moving from one network to another, but it hasn't been announced yet. So I'm not going to break any news.
Okay.
And that happens all the time. It happens in Europe a lot. It happens in England a lot.
Interesting.
It hasn't really happened too many times in the US. I think Temptation Island moved from network. There's one game show's about to move from a network. But mostly they stay in the US, they stay where their brand was built, where the brand identity is closely associated. Europe, it's more flexible. Latin America, more flexible.
Understood. And then the one other aspect that was a big realization, especially when the industry's been in turmoil for all sorts of reasons. The strikes, prior to that, there was a massive reduction in budgets. There was a post-COVID increase in budgets, and then there was a Wall Street shocker in April of 22 when things came crashing down and a lot of budgets got impacted in 2022. So we've had like multiple shocks from 22 and 23. And during that particular period, one of the things that we saw at Vitrina was that formats and season renewals were safety nets that a lot of companies gravitated to. You didn't want to take a big risk with new shows, but if there was a format that succeeded in other countries, you were happy to bring that in. So, there is some of the formats are considered very safe investments for a lot of these content companies. Does that echo with your understanding?
Absolutely. But look, let's be clear. There was a famous American screenwriter named William Goldman who wrote movies like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men, two great movies. And he wrote a book about the Hollywood business. He called it Adventures in the Screen Trade. And he said nobody knows anything. He really meant it, because if everybody knew everything, there'd be no failures. They'd all be hits. So
Yes.
a show that works really well in one territory could absolutely be a
Right.
disaster in another territory, right? Although it may
Yes.
seem like safe harbor, it may not be. But reality shows, look, they cost less than scripted programming. You can make
Yes.
them faster. The development time is shorter. And so it's a good way for the industry. Look, all over the world, everybody is having more and more reality programming on their schedule. They just will. And the next generation of viewers are so used to watching this content.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean they're going to watch it on the biggest they're not going to necessarily watch it, TV2 or Sat 1 or pick your big broadcaster. I'm not knocking them. The audience is migrating. The young audience is migrating to this. We know that for a fact. And short
Yes.
form is the next way to go. One of the things, FRAPA, we talk about is how do we help those content creators who are creating short form formats? How do we help them protect their IP in a world where there's so much content? It's a fire hose of content. Somebody once described launching a show now as like being in the middle of the ocean and opening a can of soda and seeing if you can hear it in the middle of the Atlantic, because there's so much content. How do you stand out? How do you make noise?
Interesting.
Understanding formats are the future, formats are the past, formats are the present. Formats are a way to continue to be creative. And I don't like naysayers who say, oh, the business has contracted. It has. The business has changed and it's never coming back to what it was. So if you're a creator, if you're a producer, if you're a distributor, and you're a platform, don't complain about the loss of what was. Figure out the future and go chase that. Don't bemoan the past. Be excited about the future. Stay fucking positive.
Great, that's a great motto right there for a lot of folks who are listening to this podcast. Phil, as we come to some of the end of our conversation, I wanted to sort of ask 2-3 aspects that that would be great from your vantage point. One is we've seen some waves of like suddenly you have lots of game shows come in, dating shows, right? Food became one big exciting category at one point of time, which suddenly had so much of food formats that came in. Any latest trends that you've observed that you want to highlight?
Well, I would say every buyer is always looking for that brand new, unique social experiment. What is?
Yes.
How do you define it? That's something the creative community has to figure out. Every genre that you just mentioned, game, dating, relationship, social experiment, as I say, talent, comedy, hidden camera, prank shows, makeover shows, cooking shows, remodeling shows, DIY shows, they're all here and they ain't going anywhere, right? So it's the creative's job to face a blank computer screen or a tablet, or in my day, a piece of paper, and just go, what if? I want that on my tombstone. What I want on my tombstone, not what if, but what's next. I want to know what's next. And everybody in our business should know what's next and figure it out and go. If you're going to complain about the business, don't be in the business. If you can't figure out how to ride this future, get off the bus. Figure it out. Use what, just because we thought it was one thing for 25, 30, 40, 50 years, doesn't mean it's not going to be something new that can't be exciting. 100 years ago, there was music halls and vaudeville. Then there were silent films and everybody panicked. And then there was talkies. They panicked. And then there was TV. They panicked. And then there was cable and then streamers and now YouTube. There's going to be something else. Don't panic. Be creative. Go figure it out.
With that's a very powerful sort of place to really sort of inspire the industry. Phil, you did promise us to sort of show your wine bottle.
I make wine. It's only for sale online in the US, gurinwines.com. We don't own a vineyard, but we do make wine. We source grapefruit. We make a rosé, we make a Chardonnay, steel no oak, we make a red blend, and we make a Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh my God, that is exciting, Phil. Sort of in Hollywood, you're making formats, you're making shows, you're making wine, and you're making a lot of great statements on the Vitrina podcast. It was such a pleasure to have you today. Speak to our community.
It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you for a great conversation. Please visit frapa.org. Please investigate everything on FRAPA. We need your support. We're here to help the entire formats community, and we want everybody to come, be a member, contribute, share, and be good global citizens and carry on.
Fantastic. From all of us at Vitrina and our community, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you.